wanted to just kind of talk about this slide again. Actually, probably both of you that are live with us have done this before. But I just wanted to give a reminder that we do have a grain bin locator program for Dyer County. So just a little backstory. A couple of years ago, someone from Rescue Squad asked for a map for all the grain bins in the county, and we discovered that we no longer have that. Mr. Tim had one while he was here, but somewhere in the shuffle that went away. And so I created this website and the QR code to help locate grain bins in the county. And about 9 of our farmers have done that so far. I think there's 13 grain bins listed on it right now. But the other problem with the rescue squad is that many times, especially in rural areas, farm areas, road signs come up missing. A lot of people think those are fun to take home as a souvenir. So a lot of times they have a hard time trying to find where grain bins are at because road signs are missing or what have you. So in this, I also put in the GPS address coordinates so that so that our rescue squads can find the grain bins a little easier. And as you know, if it's a moment of an emergency, the quicker they can get there and the more information they have, the better it'll be for everybody. So just wanted to share that again, that the web link works and the QR code works. So Brian, just whenever you get ready, I think we're okay. I know we're a few minutes early. I had a few farmers not be able to attend, and I texted, and one has a broken down combine, which I understand, it happens. And Fennel's back with us. He's back in service. So I know he's on the road. So I think this is probably our crowd. We have one more who is with the rescue squad that may join us here in just a little bit, Brian.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. I'm trying to do this remotely with my portable monitor, so we'll see if we can make this work.
Well, we appreciate it. And I guess for those that are in attendance, Ms. Joetta knows who you are, but the others may not. So Brian is with the Tennessee Association of Rescue Squads. And he came, Joette, I believe that was maybe it was 3 years ago because it was the month I started. They came 3 years ago and did a grain bin safety presentation at Millsfield. An excellent day where we had in-person training that morning, and then we went to the Meadows Farms and went through some scenarios. So it was a great day of training, and we appreciate TNARS for doing that for us. And also Miss Joetta helped us to get a couple of turtle tubes for the county. And I gave those to rescue squad. So I think there's 2 of them in the county. But we appreciate you for joining us tonight, and I'll just turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thanks for having us. Joetta and I are both remote at the moment, so you're coming live from the 7th floor in downtown Pigeon Forge. But can you see my screen there? Trying to just double check. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So several years ago, probably around the end of 2019, to kind of build on what Terrell was talking about, Joetta had kind of reached out to us about a grain bin safety program, and we didn't really have one. So over the last few years, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to present this all across the Southeast. And I'm happy to say that Tennessee and Kentucky and Missouri and some of the other folks are working together, as well as South Carolina and even Georgia, to try to get this out. So very honored to be a part of it, but kind of tonight, just go across the gamut of some safety around the farm. And we're going to talk about grain bins and a lot of different stuff. But one of the biggest things that gets people in trouble see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. And I guess that kind of leads into the theory that it's worked for 30 years, so why change now? And I did grow up on a farm, and agriculture is pretty close to my heart, but um, I saw everything from it's worked for the last 30 years to, you know, this is kind of dangerous. And as we look at this, um, don't want to really, I guess, go at a farmer head on and say, you know, the way you're doing it's all wrong. Look, I are one. So things happen, and basically what I kind of wanted to get out of tonight's presentation is just I just want you to kind of think about it. Take a step back. We talk about the future and kids and things like that. Um, really want to make sure we're taking care of those folks. So it's not what you see um, and hear, it's or what you think about. At the end of the day, what it boils down to is life's a marathon, not a sprint. And right now, I know in West Tennessee, you all are in the middle of harvest season, and I completely understand when somebody's combine's broke down. Um, I would a whole lot rather them be there trying to fix that piece of machinery that's going to hopefully pay the bills for the year, as opposed to this. So thank you for recording it, and that way they can watch it later on. But we talk about life being a marathon and not a sprint. Um, this is on the back of a rescue truck in Lawrence County. And you notice that kind of looks like a John Deere emblem with a yellow heart in it. That's called Hudson's Heart. And normally you don't put green and yellow on a red fire truck. But back in several years ago, they ran into a situation where a young gentleman named Sean Coram was visiting some relatives, and through a series of just accidents, um, he ended up losing his life in a grain bin. And that really put a lot of pressure, a lot of strain, a lot of mental duress on not only the family in the area, because, you know, in a rural community, everybody knows each other. The people that were responding were friends of that family that knew that family. And at the time, they were a little ill prepared for that. Um, you know, revert back to in 2019, we didn't really have an organized program for grain bin rescue or safety. Joetta has done an excellent job, and I'll give her a big pat on the back for all the work that she did, making sure people had tubes and training. And I won't lie about it. She's actually up here this weekend helping us out. She was out there pushing a broom, sweeping up glass while we're doing some of our training. That's just the way it is. And friends like that, you know, from the agricultural community, you don't ask, you just help. But our beginnings were a little bit rocky because I didn't know her, she didn't know me, and I'm like, who is this crazy woman in West Tennessee calling me about this grain stuff? And she's just, but we've developed not only a friendship, but she's family. And part of that, you know, Hudson's Heart, Hudson's mom, it's just been a big eye-opening thing to me to be a part of agriculture and agricultural safety in Tennessee. But we need to remember that it's about our future. And, you know, this little fella right here, he loved John Deere and he never got to be a farmer. But as I've told people before, you know, who knows what the bigger plan for us is, but this little fella right here sparked a lot of interest and saw the need. So even though he's not with us anymore, developed a friendship with his family, his mother, and all those people, and he's done big things. Everybody is a spoke in the wheel when it comes to this. The farmers are spoke in the wheel. Us as responders and trainers are spoke in the wheel. People like Joetta, people like your extension agents. It takes a lot of people to pull this off. But at the end of the day, um, you know, I can sit here and go, don't do this, don't do that. But I was guilty of doing one of the biggest things that I try to tell people is have your cell phone with you all the time. I was loading a tractor the other day, was in a hurry trying to get a bunch of stuff done, left my cell phone in the truck. My wife calls me 3 times and I don't answer the phone because I'm focused on trying to get this tractor loaded and chained down. And she tears out of the house and comes to where I'm at and she's standing there and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, my phone's in the truck." She said, "I didn't know if you were under the tractor or what the deal was, but you weren't answering your phone." She thought I was going to be mad at her, but ultimately, what we're going to talk about is it's usually it's accidents. It is a momentary lapse of reason or judgment because you're tired. Like I said, it's harvest time. And you know, growing up on a farm, we weren't row crop, but we were more beef cattle and hay and things like that. And you literally have to make hay while the sun's shining. Mother Nature is, if I could ever figure out how to navigate Mother Nature, then I won't be on here doing these. There will be signs I will probably be in the Caribbean somewhere. But a lot of people don't realize, and we take it for granted, and I'm one of them, that we don't have a 40-hour week job. We don't work 8 hours a day and we punch a time clock. We don't do that. It may be 3 in the morning, it may be an all-nighter, but rarely ever do we get enough sleep. And you have to take care of yourself. You know, here's kind of the little jokey meme, you know, Friday on the farm, only 34 more hours to work before Sunday evening off. And by the time you get to Friday, you've got 80 hours in. During harvest season, you're in the combine. And, you know, I told somebody today, they said, "Well, how are things going with your conference?" And I said, "We're running on the three C's right now: caffeine, Copenhagen, and chaos." Um, you know, and I'm guilty of that. And I know a lot of people are, they have their vices, but when we think about all the mental aspect of what we're trying to do, we're running a lot of heavy machinery, equipment. Again, a momentary lapse of reason, but you have to have sleep. You cannot go 24 hours a day. And this is my 35th or 36th year in public safety, and Lord knows, you know, I've pulled 48 hours and things like that. And the older I get, the more I look back at it and go, "Well, that wasn't very sane." So make sure you're taking care of yourself, number one. One of the biggest things, and statistically speaking, you know, about 1 in 5 farm accidents involve somebody that's under the age of 20 years old. And we're going to talk about a few things related to that. And this is our future, and we have to protect them. And I was that kid. That's not me, but that might as well have been me, because at 5 years old, they put me on an M farm all with 2 loaded hay wagons and said, "If you get to the bottom of the hill before we do, just drive in a big circle." Um, Probably didn't know how to operate it. I knew what a steering wheel did because I had ridden on it enough, but that was the safety briefing I got per se. So if we know that, a lot of people don't understand something that is in the federal laws. You can't go to McDonald's and, you know, be around the fry machine if you're under 18 years old. You can't get near the milkshake machine. I don't know what's in a milkshake machine because it's always broken down, apparently, or at least that's what they say. But you cannot operate that machine if you're under the age of 18. To the general public, they don't understand that farming is the only exemption in your federal labor laws. In other words, you can be 5 years old, put somebody on a tractor, and it's perfectly fine. But, you know, it says here, and statistically speaking, farming is the only, and you notice only is in capital letters and it's also underlined, industry that can employ somebody that's 9 years old. And I was that kid, you know, at 8, 9, 10 years old, cutting tobacco, putting up hay. I mean, hey, we're making bank. We do that. Sometimes we do it because it's a great way to spend time with our kids. Our kids love tractors. They love this equipment, and you know, this is our future. And I think it's great. I give a lot of the reason why I am and my work ethic and things like that to growing up on a farm and that lifestyle. But we have to take care of them, and we have to understand the simple concept. And that simple concept is this: they don't know. They haven't had the life experience, they haven't had the education, they haven't had the safety briefings or anything like that. And inexperience and being around things that they don't know or they're not really mature enough to operate is the biggest factor that leads to injuries in kids. And from being in public safety, and if you're a parent yourself, you know that one of the toughest things is working a kid college, we call it. So let's take care of the future. But the other thing that we need to consider is the fact that as we get older, things slow down. Um, I turned 50 in March of this year. And I told somebody the other day, I said, when I was in my 20s, I was invincible. When I was in my 30s, it was like the check engine light came on and nobody knows what the code is or how to fix it. When I hit 40, things started, it was like I hit a speed bump and there was a loose nut every once in a while and it made a rattle, but otherwise we're still good. But as we get older, not only do we wear out. We're like batteries. We can be recharged so many times, and then after that, that's it. But it exacerbates your medical conditions. So, statistically speaking, when you look at farm injuries, accidents, things like that, it's one of two categories: people under the age of, say, 18-ish, or people over the age of 65. And with our advanced age folks, these have the mental knowledge. They are a wealth of information. But we need to understand that, with diabetes, high blood pressure, being around equipment, losing hearing, being out in the field for long hours at a time, your parts wear out. It's like the combine. You can run it so many seasons and then you got to pull it apart, put new sheaves in it and everything else. These long hours, being out in the weather, the tasks that are required of a farmer and a rancher speed up that process. And that's just the way that it is. It's the nature of the job. So make sure if you fall into that category or if you're farming with somebody like that, make sure you watch out for them. They may do things, they may not see you. And it can cause situations where some of the younger folks or some of their farm hands, family members, whatever, may be injured. And that's a horrible thing to try to swallow. So, young people, watch out for, our seniors, and seniors watch out for the young people, and everybody in the middle. Just stay out of both of them's way, I guess. That's the easy way to put it. When it comes to ag-related incidents, and I know, you were talking about um, having the grain bin map, and that tickles me to death that, you saw the need, you tried to correct the need. One of the biggest challenges for us as rescuers is a lot of times if it is an incident that happens on a farm, we don't have a road sign or, here's the mailbox um, to drive right straight to the incident. Depending on the counties, and I'm from a small county in East Tennessee. I mean, literally, I can drive from one end of the county to the other in, say, 20, 25 minutes. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time in West Tennessee until I kind of took this job as a training coordinator. One thing I realized very quickly, and I'll use Gibson County as an example. You can have 362 counties. You may have one county seat, but you'll have 362 different communities. And good Lord, you can drive for 3 days and not get to the other end of the county. Well, if you have a centrally located, say, fire department, rescue squad, EMS, number one, in a rural setting, it's going to be a little bit to the scene. So we're already kind of behind the eight ball. And what we're shooting for on the public safety side of the house is what we call the golden hour or the golden period. And that is from the time that the injury occurs until the person is at definitive care. So definitive care is not necessarily the local hospital. It's going to be the trauma center or someplace like that that can take care of, the broken bones and the bigger problems that are probably going to be potentials for somebody that's been in an ag incident. So when we have to have such a long transport time or a long response time to the scene, um, that cuts into that golden hour. The second thing is directions to the scene. And, we have a lot of technology. We have Google Maps, we have Google Earth. Apple iPhones have all this fancy widgetry and things like that. But being from East Tennessee, and I'm sure maybe some of the folks out in West Tennessee, you get directions like this, go down to the creek there, turn next to the gate, and it's by the tree that got struck by lightning. And you remember where that old red barn was. Well, we're in that field back behind that. If you're from there, you know exactly where you're going. I mean, you don't need an iPhone to plot your course. But in the emergency services field, we're a lot like any other industry where a lot of our older senior folks are retiring out, or, you know, they can't physically do the job. And we have a lot of younger people that are coming in. These younger folks that are coming in maybe don't have that knowledge. So, with the directions, one of the biggest things that I could recommend is exactly what you did with the grain bins and the map. Make sure that your areas are clearly marked as far as, you know, maybe you take a Google Earth picture on your computer one day when you're bored in the barn and say, here's where our rendezvous point is. Or I know some farmers, in working, I think, with a project of some of the UT grad students, they were actually taking Google Earth images and having the farmers label their number of the field. And if something was to happen, then they could not only give them that, but a GPS coordinate to get them at least to the entrance to the field. Being in a remote area, unfortunately, some people are prepared. Uh, I had never seen a push bumper on an ambulance before until I went to West Tennessee. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. Why do you have, ranch hand bumpers on the front of your ambulance? And they're like, well, we have deer and other things like that. They're prepared for that. But a lot of your ambulance manufacturers, your fire truck manufacturers, that fire truck is not meant to go out into a field in the springtime when it's wet. Um, so that can hinder us because the vehicle can't get there. Cattle guards, sometimes your gates and things like that, we can't go across the bridge where there's a couple of light poles and some 2x6s nailed to it. It's fine on the tractor, but we don't know if it's going to hold it. In addition, unless they grew up in an agricultural environment, they don't know what they're looking at sometimes. They don't have that knowledge of, I probably don't need to jump in the pen with the bull that's just mauled the farmer. Uh, they don't know that that bull is very upset. So they're going to err on the side of caution, hopefully, but they may put themselves in a position where they go in and get hurt themselves. Combines, tractors, things like that. As you can see here from the photo, this is a an actual scene. If people haven't been around tractors and they don't understand the weight, or they don't understand how to shut a combine off, or if somebody gets hung up in a hay baler, especially grain bins, they don't know what danger they're facing as responders. So sometimes they can compound the problem. And then language barriers. Where I'm at, we have a large Hispanic population because we do a lot of tomato farming and things like that. And unfortunately, sometimes we are faced with a 12-year-old kid or an 8-year-old kid having to translate because they've been to school and learned English. So I know we have a lot of different nationalities that help us out on the farm agriculturally. So make sure you've got somebody that can translate if it's somebody like that. One of the other things is think about what you're wearing, I guess. Probably one of the most painful lessons that I ever learned was raking hay in the middle of summer with nothing but a pair of shorts and a pair of tennis shoes on. In other words, no shirt, legs fully exposed. And I'm not sure that a human can turn into a lobster, but I'm pretty sure that I turned into one. I didn't go to the hospital for it, but I would say, with my medical knowledge now, I probably had second-degree burns. Um, as you can see here, you have a hockey goalie. You have some of us in our turnout gear, our fire gear, and then you have the rancher over there with their chaps and things like that. Head to toe protection is not necessary. I mean, obviously, if you want to wear the goalie outfit while you're in the combine, then what's it for me to stop you? But you need to have the proper PPE, and we call it personal protective equipment. That's what we call it in the public safety world for what you're doing. So making sure you've got a hat on, making sure you've got safety or sunglasses. Never understood when I was a kid why my grandfather wore long sleeve shirts in the summertime, but he was wearing long sleeve shirts because he was very fair skinned and he didn't want to turn into a lobster. Long pants, and I'm as guilty as anybody. Wear shorts. It's hot, but those long pants protect your legs and things like that. proper footwear, sunscreen, medications, cell phone in your pocket. I've already told you about a little situation there. Make sure you've got a phone with you, and not only just a phone, but a power supply for your phone. They make the little pocket juice things. Um, Several times over the course of the last few years in doing farm machinery classes, and talking about rescue situations and issues, I have yet to do a class where either a student or someone who's helping supply equipment for that has not said, "Oh yeah, the reason why you're doing this class, I'm the fire chief and I was taking a tire off my tractor and it got off balance and it landed on top of me. And here's my cell phone on top of the air compressor, and I can see it, but I can't get to it. And I'm throwing rocks at the neighbor's dog trying to get somebody to come help me." Having a small first aid kit and then dressing for the weather. Uh, Plan for the worst and hope for the best. I know, we're not going to go into a fashion show or anything here, but believe it or not, layering actually works. I thought my mother was crazy, but turns out now that I'm an adult, it makes sense. If it's cold in the morning, dress for the cold, but then, try to wear clothes that you can shed or layers to keep that heat in. If it's hot in the summertime, we have a lot of dry fit things and things like that now that will have long sleeves but won't burn you up. So just think about it from a personal perspective. I have several family members who, being in agriculture and being out on the farm, had skin cancer and things like that later on. So make sure you do that. Now we're kind of to important part about the clothing. Okay, I when I was a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever to put on my grandfather's work boots and my grandfather's big overalls and his big coveralls because I wanted to be just like him. But essentially, looking at it now, I was probably a walking danger zone because I'm around PTOs and augers and things like that. So don't wear loose clothing around machinery that moves. One of the biggest things that gets people in trouble, especially with PTOs or even augers, is just a piece of loose clothing that gets caught up in that. And when it's rotating, the clothing is what's going to pull you into it. Um, Make sure your areas around your augers, just like most of you are in grain production, things like that right now. When you're offloading those trucks, try to have a broom or something there to keep that corn or beans swept up to where it's soybeans on concrete is the definition of marbles on glass. Um, Make sure you kind of keep your work area clean. Big thing on your safety chains, your guards, your shields, make sure they're in good shape. um, I'll tell people this, and this is proof that, I'm not perfect. When we moved from one farm shop to the other, we had big parts bins. And I remember, what in the world are all these bags with all this chain in it? And it had never been opened. And obviously, those were the safety chains for the PTO shafts for every piece of equipment we bought in the last 30 years that weren't installed. Making the chains the proper length and everything is important, but also that plastic sleeve is there to keep you from getting caught in it. And I know when we make turns with our equipment, sometimes we'll get the tractor tire into it or, when we disconnect, but really, really watch that plastic PTO guard and make sure it's not all chewed up. If there's any part that's probably cheap when you have to go replace it, it's probably going to be that plastic sleeve. That plastic sleeve and those chains are going to be a whole lot cheaper than a 30 or $40,000 helicopter ride to the trauma center and everything that happens after it. Make sure you're practicing lockout, tag out with your equipment. I know a lot of times, especially with a hay baler or something, it's making a weird racket. We can't figure out why it's doing this. You'll get off the piece of equipment, you'll leave it running so you can kind of see what's going on with it. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in the moment, no pun intended, trying to look at a piece of equipment while it's running to figure out what's wrong with it and actually get caught up in it. So make sure you try to shut that stuff off. Um, and we talk about lockout, tag out, in a industrial environment, everybody has a lock and a tag and all that fancy stuff. We're not really going to go into that much detail on the farm, but even if it's as simple as wedging a piece of rebar in the universal joint of the PTO to the drawbar of the tractor just to keep something from turning. We're all pretty industrious. We get to MacGyver things sometimes. Probably the biggest thing though is make sure your children and even when I say children, a child or someone that's not been around that equipment could be an 18-year-old college student that's trying to make a little extra money to pay for tuition. So make sure we explain the dangers of the equipment to them. One of the big things that I always ask when I do a class is, okay, how many of you grew up on a farm? Raise your hand, and they'll raise their hand. And I'll say, okay, how many of you got the safety briefing and the orientation booklet? And they're like, what? And I said, well, I haven't gotten mine either. I was just seeing if you got yours. We didn't get one of those. It was just what did dad or grandpa or uncle or whoever do, and we kind of followed their lead. So make sure we're kind of explaining that. Something else to kind of keep in mind is, a simple dust mask. As you can see here, this individual's mowing the yard, and unfortunately, in Tennessee, in the last couple of years, it's either been uh, we're flooded out and floating down the river, or it's very dry and we're in a drought. But a simple dust mask kind of keeps a lot of those particulates and contaminants from getting into your respiratory system. And this is pretty close to my heart because one of the things that my grandfather uh, lived his entire life farmed was probably my hero. He ended up being medically very ill, and what ended up creating the situation that caused him to pass away was directly related to farming, in that breathing in all the dust and the dirt all those years created a very weird, I can't even remember what the name of it was. It was so odd. But like one in, I think, 2 million people suffer from it, and it's all directly related to dust, dirt, and agriculture. So a simple dust mask, $12, keep it around. Doesn't matter if it's an older tractor, newer tractor, most of your newer equipment, combines, things like that, have a cabin air filter in them. And basically, what that cabin air filter is when you're in there with the AC. Although Joetta did point out today that she didn't like tractors with AC, and I kind of looked at her like she had an illness. Uh, I've I've ran open circuit tractors and ones with a cab, and the only time I don't like a cab tractor with AC is when the AC doesn't work in the cab tractor. Um, Even when you're in the cab, you have to understand if you're running that AC or that ventilation system, it is pulling air in from the outside. So that dust is trying to be filtered through that cabin air filter. So make sure you pull those out. I'm not, it's ridiculous what some of them cost. I agree. But if you're one of those people kind of like us and you don't want to buy the cabin air filter, at least take it in the shop and take the air compressor and blow the dust out of it. But you will be surprised what that thing will capture. And as an added side note, if your AC is not working great, first place to check is your cabin air filter, because if it's plugged up, it's not going to let the air through it. And that's when you start, why is it getting hot in here? So that's not only protecting you from the contaminants, but also probably giving you a little bit better performance. Whoops, double clutched it there. Exposure to grain dust and mold in grain bins, especially when you're cleaning the bins out. As I tell some of our responders and our students, whenever you see black chunky stuff that's stuck together like concrete, that's not good. And it's mold, and it has mold spores, and all that is filtering out into the air. Make sure you're wearing a dust mask when you're in there, especially if you've got your ventilation fans and stuff like that on, or you're putting some air into the environment. That's blowing all that stuff around. When you're in the bin, some basic bin safety. Keep kids away from bins and equipment. And I know that's like, well, okay, well, that's easy, but no, it's not. Um, I was that kid that wanted to be right in the middle of everything. And the cooler I was when or the coolest time that I was when I was right there beside the adult doing the big stuff. But biggest thing that a lot of responders that haven't been around grain bins don't realize until after they take some training is, holy crap, this big metal tube here is dangerous. You can die in this thing. So even though we want them to understand it, understand that they are children. Don't go in the bin unless it's absolutely necessary. And what I tell people is if they wanted it to have a karaoke contest on the top, they'd have put a party deck up there instead of a hatch with a little platform put on there with some sheet metal screws. Yes, you need to go in the bin to check the level of it. Maybe you're checking the moisture. Uh, I had one farmer tell me, he goes, well, sometimes we try to cram some in there and we'll get on our stomach with a rake and get in there and level it out. I get it. I've done stuff like that before, trying to, make stuff fit. But if you do have to go into the bin for whatever reason, make sure that, again, you've locked out, tagged out, all the power is off. Somebody can't come by if they don't know you're in there, turn on the augers, things like that. Don't go in the bin alone. Have somebody watching you. I think in the conversation I was telling Joetta today about my little incident with the wife coming to make sure that I wasn't underneath a tractor. She said, well, at least she knew where you were at. And I said, yes, that's true. She knew where I was at. Um, I could have had a harness, I could have had a cell phone in my pocket, but if she didn't know where I was at or didn't know I was in the bin, a lot of times on these, 5, 6, 10,000 acre farms, there's a lot of places for you to get hurt, and it's going to take a while for people to find you. Make sure if you do go in, uh, you have a tether rope and a harness. And this is my daughter here with her thumb up a couple of years ago. She could probably teach a grain bin class. She's a senior this year, and because of being around some of this grain rescue training and stuff, she got very interested in FFA, and she's the FFA president this year. Point of that is she is telling her other students, hey, you need to get my dad to come talk to you and tell you all the ways that you're doing it wrong. And I said, hey, they're not doing it wrong. She said, well, they can do it better. And I said, okay. Make sure that you never turn the augers on when people are in the bin. Biggest, probably, I want to say two things that I've seen with grain entrapments and grain injuries, at least in the last 5, 6 years. Um, when they're in the bin cleaning it out, and they'll have grain on the sidewalls of the bin, and human nature is if it's stuck to the side, go get the longest pole, pipe, whatever we can find, and we're going to whack it and let it fall down. So that's one way they get entrapped. The other is, they go into the bin because they've got some clots or they've got some mold stuff stuck on there. They're trying to figure out why, I don't have grain coming out. I'm trying to load the truck. I know there's grain in the bin. And they'll leave the augers running, forget the augers are running, go in there and they'll break that clot. And as soon as they do and the grain starts flowing, it literally sucks them in. So that's kind of the big thing. Make sure you keep your ladders and especially the steps going up to it in pretty good condition. And one thing that I've seen, and I'm not judging, but I have seen everything from, gee, you just put this up the week before we got here, and boy, this sure is fancy and bougie. I mean, this is nice, all the way up to you really climb that. Slips, trips, falls, failures, that is, goes along with just general maintenance. A little bit goes a long way. When you talk about, silos and grain bins, I know there's a lot of silos out there. Our dairy farms seem to be kind of dwindling, but a lot of these folks that have harvest stores are using them for other things. And if you've got a harvest store there and you can put, a grain in it, they're going to understand and explain, especially to maybe your responders, things like that, that these harvest stores are sealed, and that is a oxygen deprived atmosphere. One of the big things that we try to tell, you know, all of our responders, especially if they've not been around, older conventional silos or these harvest stores, is if you see one of those blue ones with the American flag on it, you better have an air monitor and you better be masked up and packed up like you're going into a house fire. Because basically, if they've got silage in it and it's green corn that was chopped up, put in there, it is sitting there fermenting and rotting. And that's what they want it to do. So make sure you explain that to maybe your workers and things. especially if you have people who've not been around that. And, you say you've got somebody that's going to help you, maybe with the goats or the feeder calves or whatever, in an old conventional silo, make sure they understand how the loader and the unloader works and things of that nature. With our equipment, ROPS, and every tractor that's been built after I think maybe 2000 or 2001 is required to have a ROPS or rollover protection system. And you notice it says ROPS seat belts. It does no good to have the rollover protection system or the roll bar if you're not wearing the seat belt. And 9 times out of 10, what we find is that roll bar that's designed to keep it from squishing you, and squish is a medical term, okay? Not really, but I use it a lot. You're on the tractor, you're on the zero turn mower, you've got the ROPS up, but you don't have the seat belt. And again, every tractor that we had a seat belt, and that seat belt was pretty much wrapped behind the seat and plugged back in, and it wasn't across our lap. Okay, I'll be honest. But when the tractor rolls over, a lot of people try to jump or they get hung up on the steering wheel or the pedals. And that ROP system is usually what has them pinned to the ground. If you think of it this way, it is kind of like an airbag in your car and a seatbelt in your car. The seatbelt's designed to keep you in the seat. The airbag's designed to cushion you so you don't move forward. That seatbelt's designed to keep you in the seat. The ROPS is designed to keep it from landing flat. Think about what you're hooking up to and how you're hooking up to it. Um, with a tractor, just by its own design, it is designed to pull a lot of weight, but weight transfer can create certain situations. And I've seen people do some sketchy things with tractors way too small. Um, somebody goes and buys a compact tractor and then they buy like a 10-foot bush hog. And you're sitting here going, you need like a 60 horse tractor, not the little 20 horse one that you've got. Several times in my career, I've seen folks who have hooked a chain, say to the drawbar on the tractor, trying to pull something out, stump, vehicle out of the pond, whatever, and the tractor counter rotates. The front end of the tractor basically endos and it flips over backwards. So think about that. Look at the weight ratings on your equipment. Make sure your hitches and your pins and things are in good working order. What about this? Again, the M Farmall that we had did not have fenders on it. So I just stood on the axle shaft and held on to the headlight bracket. Uh, but as we got older, that fender with the toolbox was the perfect place to ride. Um, just think about it if you're going to take your kids with you. Be very cautious about that. I'm all about it, but this is kind of a dangerous situation. And as I told my wife the other day, if I didn't have kids or I was younger and didn't do what I do, I probably wouldn't think about it as much. But after 35 years of working some of these calls and seeing some things, um, I would look at it a lot different with my kids now than I did then. I showed Joetta this one today and I said, you can't make this up. I said, sometimes you got to babysit, but the hay's got to get raked. This is literally someone, and I don't even know who it is. I kind of have an idea of where it's at. You know, heading to the hayfield or pulling out of the hayfield. That is a car carrier with a child laying in the car carrier strapped to the fender on the tractor, and coincidentally, they're in front of the USDA sign. So, I mean, if you're gonna do something that's photo worthy, make sure you just go full tilt. And if it's anybody on the webinar, no, I'm not poking fun at you. Don't come burn my house down. I'm just saying somebody out there in today's society is going to look at that and be like, oh my gosh, and they're going to put it on Facebook. We do what we have to do. And like I told somebody the other day, everything's risky. We just need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. If you're using loaders on equipment, this is a warning label. It has a please don't put round thing in bucket. You pick it up, it rolls down the loader arms, pins you in the seat. This is an actual call that happened in South Carolina where they were doing some tree work. They had picked up this chunk of log in the bucket, raised it up to put it on a trailer, and it literally just rolled down the lift arms. This individual wasn't hurt, but that individual was stuck. My cousin's husband called me one day. Same thing happened to him, trying to pick up a log, push it on up into the burn pile, rolled back on him, pinned him there, couldn't get to his cell phone. And he said, here I am sitting here and I can't reach the shifter on the tractor. And I'm up in this big brush pile burning. And I'm thinking, this is it. I'm going to be stuck here underneath this log that's not really hurting me. I just can't move. And I'm going to burn to death on the brush pile that I created. So think about your angles. Zero turn mowers are pretty popular these days. Um, as you can see, all different types. Some of them have the sunshade, some have ROPS, some don't. And I know a lot of ROPS get left back because you don't want to whack the tree or the bush or whatever. Again, kind of like we talked with the tractors, seatbelt without ROPS is kind of like driving a car with an airbag and no seatbelt. In addition to that, think about your weight ratings. As you can see, the one on the end there. And if you look on TikTok, Facebook, stuff like that, a lot of people, hey, I've got this weed eater attachment I made so I can mow the pond bank with it. Anytime you add something that's not a manufactured part, it may alter the mechanics and it may alter the weight and things like that. This is a scenario, so everybody don't freak out. This is an actual training scenario that we do, and you can see the ROPS is down. And the reason why I showed you that is the ROPS is holding the back end of the mower up, but the seat has the person pinned to the ground. So that extra few feet from that roll bar being up would have made a difference in this situation. And I told you we're not perfect. This is one of my rescue college instructors that actually goes out and helps teach this safety and things like that. And he sent me this about, I don't know, a year ago. And he said, I almost died today. And I said, well, yes. He's mowing. He has a mowing business. This is a big Skag commercial mower. He was mowing this lady's yard and in a hurry trying to get to the next one. And you can see that there's a bank there and it's kind of muddy. He slid off the bank. It slammed the mower sideways into the lady's house. And apparently her bathroom is directly behind where the mower deck's at because she was doing her makeup. The next thing she knows, she's got a Skag, uh, seat and everything through her wall. He was not hurt, but it scared him to death. It scared her to death. And it could have been very, very bad. So just watch when you're on even something as simple as a mower. It doesn't have to be a huge combine to create a problem. A lot of us have ATVs and UTVs around the farm. Um, you can see the Arctic cat there. That kind of looks sort of like the one I had. We got the vise, the toolbox, the chainsaw, the barbed wire. On the front, we got the booster box and the spray rig. All these pieces of equipment, make sure you're wearing a helmet. And I've never wore a helmet, but I will tell you from experience, I started wearing one because after you run through a couple of fences and land up against a tree a time or two, you kind of I'm a slow learner, but with these razors and these side by sides, they seem like they're pretty safe with the roll cages. But we have a lot of kids and things riding around on them. And anybody see anything there? I mean, I had a dog that rode on the back shelf of mine. She only had 3 legs, and you couldn't throw her off. Best burglar alarm I ever had. Here's a kid, here's a dog, but look at where the bale spear's at. Somebody comes around the barn, uh, not paying attention, throw the kid off, hurt the dog, impale yourself with a bale spear. And I will tell you that trying to unimpale someone with a bale spear through them is not fun. That bale spear is designed to hold a lot of weight, and we don't have a lot of things that we can cut through it with. So it is going to be a major undertaking if you get impaled with one of those. Think about what you've got in the shop. Um, Not saying that it does happen, but sometimes the 5 gallon uh, sheetrock bucket gets recycled for the drained oil, and the drained oil gets recycled to paint the barn and then it should be sheetrock, but maybe it's diesel fuel. You just never know. There are a ton of stuff in our service trucks and our pickup trucks in the farm shop. Kind of look around there and make sure that chemical A plus chemical B, if mixed together, don't create large boom or fire. You got pesticides, herbicides during planting season. You've got a lot of fertilizers and things like that. Um, and that's in addition to the other stuff we have. Um, Torches, um, you know, plasma cutters, things of that nature. Simple things that you don't think about can create big problems. So this photo, I don't want to gross anybody out, but this is literally the top of an aerosol paint can. But that is the top of the paint can that blew off and hit a friend of mine in the stomach. It was cold outside. He was going to paint some parts, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to warm this paint up before I paint the part." So he set the paint can on top of a space heater, got the can all warm, and as soon as he pushed the little button on top to spray it, the entire lid separated from the can under pressure. And that's the little button, little spray nozzle. Plus, you can see the round part with the ring where the lid blew off of it. Sometimes it's not, it could be the chemical itself, but is it flammable? Is it corrosive? Things of that nature. So just kind of watch that. Try to make sure that you label your bottles. This is actually out of my garage, and you notice it says Zep Spirit 2, which is what was in it initially. But and that's a pretty high powered cleaner, disinfectant. But I needed that bottle to put some decals on something, so I dumped the Zep out of it, washed it out, and even though it looks like it's a chemical, it actually had baby shampoo and tap water in it. Um, Never trust and I'm not being rude about it, but never trust a generic bottle on the farm. You just never know what it is. And I'm from East Tennessee, so it could be moonshine. Um, you got QR codes and things like that. If you're a tech savvy person, you can scan that and it will kind of tell you some of the do's and don'ts of that product. WD-40 on the back of the can itself. This is just an example. Any chemical that's manufactured commercially is required to have an MSDS, and I know a lot of your bigger operations have those around, and that's great. Probably not going to tote that with you in the combine, nor are you going to tote it with you in this. Obviously, you can see this is a commercially built spray rig. It is a blue 55-gallon tank. It has homemade hose plumbing, and I will tell you that used to be our spray rig on the farm to spray tobacco. So our big question from the hazmat world is what is in the tank? It could be water, it could be moonshine, I don't know. It's methyl ethyl bad stuff. But try to make sure you label that. I've run into several situations where somebody's been out spraying, had a medical emergency, been working on a sprayer, had one guy turn one over. And I don't know what the purple grape sweet smelling stuff in there is, but I'm guessing that it's probably not grape Kool-Aid. So try to help us out a little bit. Moving equipment, it's usually not our fault. We can hug the side of the road, we can do everything in the world, but people are impatient. So whenever you are moving equipment, try to have a chase vehicle with you, with your emergency lights, your yellow hazards, things like that. Make sure you have your slow stop placard. You notice there the sprayer. A good friend of mine was moving a sprayer from one field to the other and going through the middle of town. And he said, next thing I know, I stop at a red light and I felt the sprayer move a little bit. And he said, I was like, what was that? He thought maybe the wheel come loose and he looked and the little grandma had drove under him and was under the sprayer and she was looking up through the sunroof at him. So whenever you're moving it, again, make sure you have your placards on there. That placard is not going to keep somebody from hitting you, but we live in a litigation happy world. So somebody out there is going to say, well, they didn't have that slow moving vehicle placard. So make sure you've got everything, properly marked and covered on your end. Uh, but theoretically, and I call this the lug nut rule, the vehicle that has the most lug nuts or the biggest lug nuts usually wins the prize. Uh, you know, you can get into all kinds of traffic laws, but motorists should slow down when they see farm equipment and they should pull over. But some people blow the horn and wave at you with one finger because they've got to get to Walmart or whatever. Understand that some people in a rural community, they're going to give you a wide berth, but some people won't because they don't understand that that combine's not, a sports car. Unfortunately, what happens is, you run into some situations like this. Uh, Cars run into the back of tractors, people get launched off, run under the front header of the combines. So again, practical application of the lug nut rule. Electrical, just kind of walk around and look at things a little bit. Make sure your drop cords aren't just like straight wired into the plug, things of that nature. Uh, Went to a farm in South Carolina. Gentleman's grandfather started the farm in the 60s. He had grain bins from the 60s. He had a grain bin and a dryer that he just put in the year before. And we walked past his main breaker panel in the middle of about 20 grain bins. And he looked at me and he goes, "Don't even look at that." And it was everything from old screw in glass fuses to literally a drop cord that was hot wired into a breaker running through a water puddle over to the bin. And he goes, "That's the one I'm talking about." Just watch your electrical stuff. Uh, General rule of thumb, if it looks like it's unsafe, it probably is. When it looks like, Chevy Chase's Christmas vacation light display, uh, a 20 amp plug that's got about 700 amps coming out of it, things get a little sparky sometimes. Also on your equipment, double check your fire extinguishers and make sure you have the right kind of fire extinguisher for what you're wanting to do. You have water cans, you have foam, powder, CO2, and then the wet chemical. Class A, B, and C, they're all a little different. But the big thing with them is make sure not only it's the right extinguisher, but make sure you have them checked. The extinguisher that sits for a while, the powder will kind of condense in the bottom of it. You'll need it, pull the pin, squeeze the trigger, and nothing comes out, even though it's completely full. A lot of stuff on your machinery, make sure you're blowing it off, keeping a lot of that dust, debris, the oil, coolant, things like that off of it. This is looking up in the side of a combine. We have a lot of flammable stuff there, and all we need is a spark and something to get it going. Whenever we have situations like this is a lot of money sitting in a field that's also a lot of money. Kind of hard to reach. And even though, oh, look, there's a 10-pound extinguisher or 20-pound extinguisher on the combine. If it gets to the point that you see in that picture, that's going to require a little bit more than an extinguisher. But take it from somebody who we didn't have extinguishers on our equipment. We had an electrical issue in a tractor and it almost burnt the whole tractor down. After that, we put extinguishers on everything. Uh, it's one of those things you hope you never have to use, but if you do have those or don't, make sure you keep them checked and in date. So with that, I think I've reached the time that you gave me, and that's drinking from a fire hose of all things to think about on the farm. As I told Joetta, if anybody decides they want to buy me anything for Christmas, I wear a size 40-20. Just saying. So
Thank you, Brian. Very good job. Anybody have any questions? All right, we appreciate it. And I think a lot of really good, timely, reminders that we need to keep in mind. And, it is a very, dangerous job. And so we appreciate what you all do. And, we appreciate what rescue squads do to help us out. Anybody have any questions? All right. If not, we'll go ahead and end, but we appreciate it. Brian, thank you for your time. I know you've got a lot of things going on. We appreciate you taking up the time to help us out.
you're
And
quite welcome.
just